Welcome back to a new episode of Wheels of History. Before we tell you everything about today's protagonist, we invite you to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. For you, it's just a small gesture, but for us, it's essential to continue sharing stories of men and machines that have marked an era. Today, as you've guessed, we talk about the genius inventor who hated motorcycles. He found them uncomfortable, dirty, noisy, like wild beasts in a yard, crude and inconvenient. So he invented the Vespa. But Corradino D'Ascanio is not just the Vespa, no. He is much more. He is a mind that saw beyond, even when no one else was looking. In summer, when a soft sound vibrates in the air, someone scans the sky searching for a helicopter. Another lowers their gaze and sees a red Vespa slicing through the street like a poem running on two wheels. That sound, in the sky or on the asphalt, is the breath of his invention. Corradino was born in Popoli, in Abruzzo, a land of silence and hard stone. He didn't speak much, but his machines did, and they spoke well. He was a poet of engineering, someone who was already thinking of tomorrow while the rest of the country was still trying to patch the present. And to understand where all this comes from, we need to take a big step back, far back, to the Renaissance when Leonardo da Vinci drew air as if it were clay. It is said that the world's first helicopter came right out of his mind. And indeed, among his manuscripts preserved in Paris, there is a strange and visionary drawing. The aerial screw, Folio 83, Manuscript B, for those who love precise coordinates. But beware, Leonardo's was a dream without an engine, a spiral on paper pushed by human hands without wind or fire to bring it to life. It was an idea, yes, but not yet a machine, a thought that looked up but didn't yet know how to fly. It was D'Ascanio, centuries later, who took that dream and put pistons, propellers, carburetors inside it, who made it truly take off. Born on February 1, 1891, son of Giacomo and Anna, young Corradino grew up between mountain breezes and the fire of curiosity. While other boys played football, he built wooden and canvas airplanes, launching them from the village hills as if challenging fate itself. At just 15, while the echo of the Wright brothers' flight struggled to reach Europe, he was already testing his gliders on slopes and gullies. To become an engineer, he left his Abruzzo and moved to Turin, where he graduated in mechanical engineering. But books were not enough. He wanted to see his ideas take shape in flesh and bolts. He volunteered in December 1914, joining the Aviators Battalion. He tested engines, studied, innovated. He was responsible for the first Italian system to prevent oil freezing at high altitude, and even the first onboard radio transmitter installed on a military aircraft. In 1917, driven not only by science but also by love, he created a rudimentary but effective domestic communication system to speak with his fiancée, Paola Paolini. 2 houses, a wire, and electricity that only flowed at night. Tenderness made technical. After the war, he crossed the Atlantic, arriving in America with the son of the Vat, Ugo Veniero D'Annunzio, to design a plane powered by a Harley-Davidson engine. The venture never took off, and Corradino returned, but he brought with him the scent of the new world and the certainty that he could build it. Back in his hometown, Cavaliere Corradino D'Ascanio did not get lost in embellishments or nostalgia. He opened a civil and industrial engineering workshop, as one used to say with respectful sobriety. There, among the austere alleys and the crisp air of Popoli, he resumed forging the iron of his ideas, as steel-strong as his will. It was no quiet life, but an intense one. Projects for industry, calculations for the public good, workshop solutions and cutting-edge inventions. He arranged Giuseppe Paolini Square with the precision of an urban planner, where he also wanted a monument to the fallen, sculpture and civic feeling united. At the request of the magistrate, he signed a technical report on a section of electric line near the forest of the castle. It was necessary to determine whether everything had been done according to the rules dictated by science and practice. And who better than him? The years in Popoli were years of stubborn sewing. He filed dozens of patents, from the electric oven with medium thermal capacity for baking bread and pastries, a modern gift to southern bakeries, to the electro-pneumatic machine for cataloging and quick searching of documents, a clever device that used punched cards to activate electric circuits. The idea was clear. Man must master information, not succumb to it. But the land was not enough for D'Ascanio. And although his studio brought him good income, his mind always returned to flight, the real one, vertical, intimate like an obsession. He continued to study, invest, and design. Between 1923 and 1924, in an Italy still patching its clothes, D'Ascanio invested 266,510 lire, a fortune, in the study of an orthopter. The dream had deep roots. In 1925 he found an ally in Baron Pietro Trojani of Pescosansonesco. A wealthy and visionary man, Trojani did not laugh at D'Ascanio. He believed in him and put his money where his faith was. Together, they founded a company with the declared and noble intention of raising and prospering an aviation industry in this industrious area of Abruzzo. The words sounded solemn, but the facts would surpass them. Over time he continued to sow ideas, from a soap dispenser to an olive press, from a pastry oven to a speed indicator. Every time reality stood as a limit, he bent it with ingenuity. On April 7, 1925, the engineer filed the patent for the coaxial two-rotor helicopter, a milestone in the history of vertical flight. In the following 5 years, patents rained down like olive leaves in autumn, some aeronautical, others domestic, all born from the same mind that never knew idleness. Construction of the first prototype began. The parts were forged in the workshops of Eugenio Camplone in Pescara, where the agreement was simple and honest. In exchange for the mechanical work, D'Ascanio designed new industrial and agricultural machines for the workshops. Thus, in the foundry courtyard, the first experiments were born, the D-1 and the D-2. They were clumsy but courageous creatures. They flew for a few seconds, trembled, and then fell again. But it was not failure, rather a necessary passage. D'Ascanio watched them with steady eyes, already thinking of a better successor. Because true flight, the kind that never crashes, is the thought of those who never stop building. The third prototype took a dry and prophetic name. D-3, that is, D'Ascanio Trojani, 3, legitimate child of genius and capital, ideas and faith. The Ministry of Aeronautics commissioned it for 600,000 lire, a respectable sum in an Italy still recovering from hunger and restless for glory. The hands that built it were those of the Aeronautical Engineering Corps of Rome. The heart, however, beat strong in Popoli. The tests were held at Ciampino Nord, under open skies and tense hearts. The Utopia was piloted by Major Marinello Nelli, the first man in the world to tame the challenge of vertical flight. These were days of wind and bated breath, and finally, in October 1930, the miracle happened. With a Fiat A.50S engine of 90 horsepower, the D-3 set 3 international records. Flight with non-stop return, 8 minutes and 45 seconds, October 8th. Straight line distance, 1,078 meters and 60 centimeters, October 10th. Maximum altitude, 18 meters, October 13th. They were cold numbers, but within them lay the epic of progress. La Domenica del Corriere celebrated the achievement on its cover. Newspapers made headlines reminiscent of World War I. The patent was requested in almost every Western country, and even in Japan. Glory, at least on paper, seemed assured. Yet Italy, stepmother to her best sons, turned a deaf ear. The Royal Navy showed interest and Mussolini offered flattering words, but funding was not renewed. The D-3 ended up silent and forgotten in a dirigible hangar at Ciampino, like a lion locked in a cage. Baron Trojani saw his fortune dry up. The dream of industrial production crashed against the blind wall of bureaucracy and indifference. The ingenuity remained intact, but the pockets were empty. The triumph of thought was not enough to fill plates. In 1931, Corradino D'Ascanio, fresh from glory, found himself on the brink of poverty. He had given everything to the sky: time, money, reputation. Even his wife Paola's dowry was consumed by his passion for vertical flight. The world does not pay its heroes except after martyrdom, yet it was precisely the propeller, the variable pitch blade that his helicopter had made necessary, that saved his life. No one in Italy knew how to handle it better than him. When the aeronautical industry needed it, it was the aeronautical section of Rinaldo Piaggio that turned its gaze toward the wounded-hearted Abruzzese with hands of gold. In 1932, D'Ascanio began a technical collaboration with Piaggio that would change his life. He earned 1,000 lire for each propeller produced. A breath of air that soon became a river, especially in the years when war was climbing to the skies and fighters demanded impossible performances. The Piaggio D'Ascanio propellers became synonymous with reliability and power. They were mounted on Machi and Caproni planes, both record-setters and fighters. Behind the legendary rise of Colonel Mario Pezzi, who reached 17,000 meters with his Caproni CA.161 bis, there was still him, D'Ascanio. And not only for the propeller, he also conceived the liquid oxygen respirator, ahead of its time and saving the pilot. The years leading up to the great global disaster finally offered D'Ascanio a serene harbor. The Abruzzo genius, now mature and tempered by disillusionment, worked steadily and with some comfort in the Piaggio factories, where the air smelled of hot metal and ideas seeking form. The dream was always the same, the helicopter, that mechanical dragonfly he had carried in his heart since childhood. But over there in Pontedera, no one really believed in it. In 1935 he dared again. He put on paper a bold project, PD2, a code hiding behind cold metal, the bond between Piaggio and D'Ascanio. The first PD1, with coaxial rotors like his ancient Popoli children, was soon lost to history. It was time for new geometries of the sky, but the PD2 proved a chimera too far ahead of its time. In 1937, the Air Force grew tired of waiting, and his gamble faded silently, like wind dying down on the runway. Then in 1939, D'Ascanio tried the path of simplicity, a single main rotor paired with an anti-torque propeller. What today we would call the classic configuration he had intuited years in advance. His PD3 seemed like a premonition, but it lacked the blessing of a Sikorsky, and Italy, marching toward war, no longer had time for dreamer engineers. The PD3 remained grounded until 1942. It was finally flown, as if not to wrong it, and immediately after was put away in a warehouse in Buti, where misunderstood ideas go to die. But his name would truly enter legend 20 years later in 1945, when Enrico Piaggio entrusted him with an impossible task, to build a motorized vehicle for an Italy hungry, tired, but hungry for the future. Corradino hated motorcycles. He found them dirty, uncomfortable, vulgar, but precisely for this, he set to work. It was the war, as often happens, that gave the first push. The Americans, who always think in practical terms, brought to Europe a curious two-wheeled contraption, the airborne Cushman, a small military scooter used by paratroopers to move quickly among ruins and countryside. It proved useful even at Monte Cassino during the liberation of Italy, and it did not go unnoticed. In those dark years of post-war resurrection, when chimneys coughed smoke and Italy, still wearing patched trousers, searched for a new elegance in movement, something happened. Corradino D'Ascanio, spirit of Abruzzo, austere and brilliant, more engineer than dreamer but with the soul of a poet of mechanisms, was given by Piaggio the task to remake the world, at least on two wheels. D'Ascanio, a man of air and not asphalt, with his mind still full of propellers and landing gears, was handed a prototype called Paperino, a motorcycle from Biella that smelled too much of bolts and nothing of the future. He discarded it like a thin, tasteless broth. It wasn't for him. He wanted something else. Something with the grace of an eagle and the precision of a scalpel. Not a motorcycle, a revolution. Thus, he invented an idea of aeronautics applied to the road, the monocoque body, pressed sheet metal, folded like mechanical origami. No more tubes, no more ugly visible joints, but a single body, strong and slender, that could be mounted like sitting at a school desk. The frame was a fuselage, the front suspension, an airplane landing gear. The Vespa, the one that would become a queen, was born from a mind that flew high, very high. And then that discovery, simple and brilliant, the handlebar gear shift, operated with one hand and coupled to the clutch. Nothing like it had ever been seen before in motorcycling. An absolute novelty, documented and patented. D'Ascanio left nothing to chance, not even the air he breathed. At first, the gear numbers were even hand-engraved, painstaking work, like that of a goldsmith. It was done by a true Piedmontese, Mario Audizio, hired in '39, who, armed with a graver, traced each number on the control, a poetry of precision in brutal times. And so was born the monocoque body, a shell of pressed sheet metal that seemed fragile but resisted more than the old tube framework, like certain slender women who, bent by the wind, never break. You no longer rode iron, no, you sat down, poised, composed as on a church pew, and this made the lady's eyes sparkle, finally able to challenge the asphalt with grace and dignity. Light hands on the handlebar. Here were the controls, here was the new music. No more acrobatics, no more oil belts or greasy chains to tame. The rear wheel came off with the simplicity of an unbuttoned coat. Farewell to curses on dirt roads, farewell to breakdowns that stopped the soul. The transmission? Internal, clean, a dance among gears like a Viennese waltz. Thus was born the MP46, elegant as a woman walking on heels down a Roman alley, simple as a glass of water drunk after work. In 1946 it was launched into the world. Here was the Vespa, baptized so by Enrico Piaggio himself, who, seeing the prototype, exclaimed with wonder, "It looks like a wasp!" slender at the waist, buzzing with energy, ready to fly on the ground. The first model, the 98, debuted in 1946 in Milan. People looked at it, then desired it, because in that compact frame was all the reborn Italy, industrious, beautiful, fast. The series followed, and in 47 the 98 sailed into the hearts of Italians. Thus began the revolution. From the city to the countryside, from courtyards to seaside promenades, the Vespa became a gram of freedom under the leather seat. In Pontedera, the factory churned out the future in the form of 98 cubic centimeters of freedom, a horizontal single-cylinder, air-cooled by forced airflow, 3 gears, and 3.2 horsepower that felt like 30 when the wind caressed your face. 60 kilometers per hour, but speed was not what mattered, it was the way you arrived. The Vespa was poetry on wheels, the mechanical equivalent of a Modugno song. You flew without wings. It was the perfect companion for the seamstress, the railway worker, the student, the priest, the mechanic, and first love. The Topolino was too expensive. The Vespa was the popular flight, and so you set off. You really set off towards the sea, towards the hills, towards freedom. Italy moved like a flock in spring, swarms of Vespa riders with open shirts, knees in the wind, souls arm in arm with the future. In 56, just 10 years after the first flight, the millionth Vespa rolled off the assembly line like a pilgrim Madonna, consecrated not in a church but on the asphalt. It had become a symbol, an icon, a pride, and the world from then on was a little smaller, a little sweeter, a little more Italian. Why so much success? Because the Vespa is a perfect balance between sky and earth. It is high-class engineering but also everyday grace. It is bicycle but also automobile. It is aerial lightness and urban protection. It is the dream of mobility with the soul of flight. In 1953, a triumphant and confident America discovered a fragile but beautiful Italy. Like an ancient statue brought to light, Rome showed itself to the world with its wounds and its grace, set in a light that seemed golden even on rainy days. Roman Holiday was more than a film. A light comedy, yes, but also an open window onto a country that was beginning to breathe again. Audrey Hepburn was the runaway princess, Gregory Peck the shrewd journalist who guided her through the secrets of the eternal city. But there was a third protagonist, silent and agile, a metallic green Vespa 125. It sped through the imperial forums, the squares, the cobblestones, carrying laughter and wonder. And when the princess, inexperienced but determined, took the wheel on Rome's streets and was stopped for reckless driving, the whole world realized it wasn't just a scene, it was a promise. Italy was alive, and it had 2 wheels. In 1954, Forbes wrote that the Oscar, rightly awarded to Hepburn, could have also gone to the other female star of the film, the Vespa. They were right. The film became an overwhelming and entirely unintentional advertisement for the Italian scooter, which went from a tool of reconstruction to suddenly become a symbol of style, freedom, desire. From that moment on, the Vespa stopped being just a vehicle. It became an icon. It appeared in films, novels, dreams. It was both background and presence in Fellini's La Dolce Vita. It was there in the melancholic silence of Nuovo Cinema Paradiso, in that province that was changing without noticing. And in the 21st century, it was still there, with its innate elegance, between the slender legs of Penelope Cruz, on the surreal streets of Zoolander 2, where even the absurd needs style. The Vespa never left the stage. It stayed in the frame, even when the story seemed to go elsewhere. Always faithful, always beautiful, like Rome. But its value does not lie only on the big screen. The Vespa has been a muse of literature, lady of the streets, companion to pens and camera lenses. It changed mobility, yes, but even before that, it changed perception. From the years of black bread and queues to the freedom of wind in the hair and blooming handlebars. 16 million units produced. 130 different models. Numbers that speak for themselves. It's not just engineering, it's culture, it's design that travels, that endures, that moves emotions. It's that machine that made wonders normal and the everyday extraordinary. If the Vespa became all this, the credit goes to the vision of Corradino D'Ascanio, who, meanwhile in 1948, when Europe was still counting its ruins like sleepless sheep, received an unexpected invitation from across the ocean. It was the American Helicopter Society calling D'Ascanio to the Fourth World Congress. There, among the lights and marvels of America, he was welcomed as a pioneer, almost a patriarch of vertical flight. The American honor rekindled in him the passion that Italy seemed to have buried beneath files and mistrust. Upon returning, he spoke to the heart of Enrico Piaggio, the visionary industrialist who had already sensed the times with the Vespa, and Piaggio, a man with a keen nose, decided to listen. In 1949 the new PD-3 was born, reassembled with the surviving parts and the unshakable faith of the engineer. It flew, oh how it flew, until February 1951, when an accident, more existential than technical, marked the end of another dream. Yet neither Corradino nor Enrico gave up. They then designed the PD-4, a boulder machine, 2 rotors in tandem, a mechanical dance of rare complexity. But the beating heart was weak, the installed power was scarce, the helicopter did not obey as it should. They lightened everything by removing the fairing, insisted with the stubbornness of true believers. On August 5, 1952, the worst happened. Tragedy was narrowly avoided, but the project was stopped. No one died, but it was as if something inside died. The PD-4 was valid, but money was needed, lots of money, and Piaggio was no longer willing to bet on the helicopter. Italy was running on other roads. It was the time of civil rebirth, of the Vespa slicing through squares with the light roar of the 2-stroke engine and the rustle of skirts in the wind. All of Pontedera's company efforts were focused on that bourgeois and popular revolution that spoke to the heart of the country. The Vespa was future, freedom style. The helicopter remained a luxury for generals and visionaries. Meanwhile, D'Ascanio continued to fly, collaborating with Augusta, signing new patents even in old age, like the patient lifter and a gym device for the back. A precursor of well-being, in body and spirit. He died in Pisa on August 6, 1981, but his genius was never buried. He rests in Popoli, under a broken column he himself designed, a symbol of a life bent by time, but never broken by oblivion. Corradino D'Ascanio was much more than an engineer. He was a poet of the air, a craftsman of mechanics, a dreamer with oil-stained hands. He invented the first helicopter and designed the world's most beloved scooter. He worked for Piaggio, for Augusta, for the university. But above all he worked for the idea, noble and pure, that Italian ingenuity could change the world. And today, every time a Vespa starts up in a sunny square or among the alleys of an ancient village, it is as if Corradino still whispered to the wind, "I did not teach you to drive, I taught you to fly, without lifting the wheels off the ground." Because true greatness does not lie in the roar of the engine, but in the silence it leaves behind, that of admiration, beauty, history that found wings. And this was Corradino D'Ascanio, not just an engineer, an alchemist of the future, a man who made even asphalt fly, forever. We stop here, but the road of legends continues and the wheels keep turning. The stories remain, each person tells a journey and unveils an era.